Parker, but exactly what went on at the club has never been substantiated. Whatever the truth, marriage had not mellowed Philip. He was a man of his time and background, just as his wife was a woman of hers, and he didn't see why he shouldn't continue to enjoy jesting with cronies. The palace old guard didn't approve. There was great concern about Philip's apparent desire to continue bachelor friendships with people of somewhat dubious reputation. But rather than reining him back, their attitude seemed only to spur him on. The move to Clarence House was a welcome reprieve. Under Philip's supervision, it had been kitted out with the latest household gadgets, including an intercom system, washing machines, and an electric trouser press. In 1949, the prince became first lieutenant to HMS Checkers, the lead ship of the Mediterranean destroyer fleet, based in Malta. Princess Elizabeth frequently flew out for lengthy stays. Her time in Malta has often been described as the only time she could live like an ordinary naval wife, driving herself, going to the hairdresser and shopping. In truth, it was a life less ordinary. Their villa had a staff of 19, and the princess also had her lady-in-waiting and detective in tow. In 1950, much to Philip's delight, he was appointed to his first command, the frigate HMS Magpie. Back home, however, the news was grim. The king was ailing with a bug he couldn't shake off. The following year, Philip took leave and came home to share his wife's duties as she stood in for her father at official functions. An operation to remove one of the king's lungs seemed to go well, so the next year the royal couple flew to Nairobi on the first leg of a Commonwealth tour. It was Mike Parker who picked up news of the king's death on a shortwave radio after speaking to Martin Charteris, Princess Elizabeth's private secretary, and woke Philip at a Kenyan lodge. According to Parker, his private secretary, the prince looked as though the whole world had dropped on his shoulders. Lady Pamela Hicks, who was also there, recalled that Philip's first reaction was to put a newspaper over his face and remain motionless for 5 minutes. Pamela said, and then he pulled himself together and said he must go and find the princess. She was having a rest in her bedroom. And so they went for a walk in the garden, and you could tell, walking up and down, that he was telling her. She came back to the lodge, and one just thought, this poor girl who really adored her father. They were very close. I think I gave her a hug and said how sorry I was. And then suddenly I thought, my God, but she's queen. The awful thing, added Pamela, was that the couple hadn't expected her to take on the job until they were in their 50s. Elizabeth requested that no pictures be taken as she left the lodge, but there were a couple of photographers already outside. We stood silently outside the lodge, one of them recalled, as the cars drove away in a cloud of dust, not one of us taking a shot at that historic moment. Seeing the young girl as Queen of Great Britain as she drove away, I felt her sadness as she just raised her hand to us as we stood there silent, cameras on the ground. When the Queen arrived back at Heathrow on February 7, 1952, Winston Churchill and the rest of the Privy Council lined up to greet her. At that moment, Philip knew that his life had changed forever. Years later, he recalled, people used to come to me and ask me what to do. In 1952, the whole thing changed, very, very considerably. Churchill insisted he and the new queen move to the palace, an enormous wrench for Philip, for whom Clarence House had been the only home he'd ever been able to call his own. For the queen, however, it was simply a matter of going to the place where she'd lived very happily for much of her life. For the prince, problems soon multiplied. Philip was constantly being squashed, snubbed, ticked off, rapped over the knuckles, said Mike Parker. It was intolerable.